busy man. So.
3. So hi, everybody. Welcome back. Speaking of, welcome back to VCTV, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you. We just talked moments ago about everything happening in blockchain and crypto today, but we're now going to switch gears as we've brought an outstanding investor and a family friend here at VCTV to talk a little bit about what's happening in Africa. And we've covered Africa in many of the episodes here on VCTV, but we're going to take a little bit of time and talk with one of the experts who's actually investing in the region and building in the region as well, to share us what's happening on the ground, so we get a little bit more perspective of the opportunities there as well. But for those who haven't tuned in before, welcome. For those who have, welcome back. And for everyone, make sure you click the subscribe, share the episode, check out the archive on LATOKEN.com to hear more from all of the speakers of the VCTV family, as we bring, again, the best and the brightest from around the world to share their on-the-ground insights and perspective around different technologies, industries, and regions around the world. And if you'd like to be on a show like today, reach out to myself or the team, and we'll find that right spot for you. A big thank you to the LATOKEN team and to Maria for making VCTV possible every single day. With that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. Joel, welcome back to the show. It's a pleasure. A little intro, a little background for everybody.
Thanks, Kyle. Always a pleasure to be with you. I enjoy your podcasts, and it's a pleasure to be here today. So my background basically has been long-term in retail, hospitality, and digital broadcasting. I was one of the early people that got involved with DirecTV, which was the first digital broadcast company, the first broadcast company to offer you 200 wonderful channels with no content 25 years ago. And I was a vice chairman of DirecTV in Japan, where we opened up that market, which was a very I'd say stodgy market controlled by government. So my early days in digital were back in 1995 to 2000 period. So I'm the founder of East West Hospitality Group based in Hong Kong. I've happened to be in the US since March because of COVID. And Asia is pretty well locked down, no travel between countries. So it's, instead of being in a small apartment in Hong Kong, I'd rather be in a nice house on a golf course here in the West Coast of the United States. So my background with Africa started in 2014, and I've been involved deeply in Africa since 2014, so 7 years now. And we've worked primarily with investment companies as advisors. So East West Hospitality Group is a private equity VC advisory firm. And so we are involved in buyouts, minority investments in various consumer and retail and hospitality businesses. So of course, a lot of that does involve now delivery, ordering, all the normal digitization of any retail business which is happening. So the thing that's interesting about Africa is, having had a lot of experience on the ground in China, we worked on over 50 projects in China over the last 6 or 7 years, is the China experience on the ground in China with local Chinese companies, not with multinationals, but with local entrepreneurs, gave me an enormous amount of insight into how to deal with Africa. Because we deal with Indonesian entrepreneurs, Vietnamese entrepreneurs, Indian entrepreneurs around the world, and these are local people starting businesses. And as you can imagine, the last 5 or 6 years, those businesses have been heavily into digitization of their economies. So Africa is quite a few years behind even Indonesia or Vietnam in terms of, and I'll explain it this way, per capita incomes are lower, but not that significantly lower. I think what's really different are the institutions. The institutions in these countries are very pro-business and have built highways, have built nice airports, have nice commercial real estate. And so they are more developed beyond their years. In other words, they are more developed in comparison to their per capita income. In the case of Africa, generally, it's a very underdeveloped economy in terms of infrastructure, in terms of retail. I mean, just in terms of power, everything you would take for granted are issues in Africa. Now, less so in East Africa, like Kenya, which is probably the most developed of any of the markets. Many of the African markets tend to be very small. So they could have 30 million people, 40 million people. So you have two very large markets, Nigeria, with over 250 million people, I believe, and Ethiopia with about 100 million. But Nigeria obviously is the best opportunity because of the size of the population, but it has enormous challenges. I mean, the power may go out 3 or 5 times a day, and this is a large oil and gas exporter. So there are reasons for that, some tied to corruption and other reasons. They'd rather export the energy at a higher price than have the people, buy gas. But generally speaking, it's very difficult to do business in places like Nigeria simply because of the basic infrastructure, the basic government systems, going through immigration, looking at the quality of the airports. The markets of East Asia, like of Vietnam or Indonesia, are at least 25 years or more ahead of these African countries in terms of basic infrastructure. Okay, so that causes an enormous set of problems to investors, but there's also opportunities because, for example, in a place like Kenya, they would go from having the old type of rabbit ear TVs, UHD, whatever it's called, the TV where you had your grandparents had when they were kids. They moved from that, they skip cable and go straight to internet stream. Okay, nobody has a landline. They go from nothing to cell phones. So they skip several layers in the development process. So if you look what's going on the ground in Africa, it's following what's going on the ground in most emerging markets. Delivery is important. Cashless payments are important. So these general trends that are global are happening in Africa. Instead of going on motorcycles in China delivering food, they're using bicycles. When I was first in Africa in 2014, they had a very innovative cashless payment system in Kenya called Pesa, which was developed by Safaricom, and they were using all cheap analog phones. So they're making payments with analog phones, not digital phones, not smartphones. So they made it work. And what would happen is the consumer would go to a Safaricom store, put down some money, load up their card, and then use it to pay stuff. So it was very primitive in that sense, but America didn't have a system like that. People were not paying with smartphones in 2014 in my knowledge. So there's some parts of the economy which are very innovative, and some parts like driving on a highway with bumpy roads and having the power go out at home. I was on a call last week with a private equity fund manager, and in the middle of the conversation, her power went out. You're talking about someone living in an apartment. She has more than enough money as an MBA from Wharton to live well, and it doesn't matter where she lives, the power goes out. So that's a challenge. Now that happened in Indonesia back in 1980, so fast forward, we're 40 plus years later, the power doesn't go out in Indonesia, unless there's terrible typhoons or earthquakes or whatever. But in places like Nigeria, it goes out quite often. So I would say, in summary, the opportunity is that there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of people hungry for opportunities, and there's a lot of entrepreneurship. The key is to match the income levels with the opportunities, recognizing that you don't have $50,000 per capita incomes in these places like you would in Singapore or the United States or Hong Kong or Japan or Korea. It's not that kind of a market. It's a very low price market. People can only afford certain things. And that's one benefit of digitization. Obviously, it can make things a lot cheaper for people, allow them to get things easier than they could ordinarily. So that's kind of a brief background of experiences I've had in Africa. We've been involved in coffee chains. We've been involved in delivery businesses, cashless payments, a bunch of other hospitality businesses. And so we get the consumer there. And, the consumer, like any consumer around the world, wants to enjoy themselves, go out. And the other thing I would say is retail is more important in that part of the world than it may be in the United States, because people don't live in large homes and they're cramped, and they may live with 3 generations of families. So, I think the daughter-in-law would like to get away from the mother-in-law sometime, or the grandmother. And so they like to go out and do stuff rather than stay at home, lock the door, and play e-games. The houses, when they're that small, people want to get out. which is if you're in a typical house in the United States, there's less of a pressure to get out, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Unless
And
you
so
want to get away from your kids, you know.
Right. And from an investor standpoint, I mean, if you're looking at different technologies to maybe start investing in, are there's those that stand out above the rest? I mean, fintech seems to be a very flourishing market in, especially in Northern Africa, as we've heard a lot here on VCTV. But what other technologies or technical industries are you seeing as opportunities from your efforts and work in Africa?
Well, as I said, whatever is working in emerging markets in Southeast Asia is going to work in Africa over time. I think that's the best way to put it. I think one of the most exciting things, I don't know if you noticed this, but in Indonesia, there are companies that are basically digitizing the entire retail experience in these little, they call them warungs, which are little huts where people go down, like a little convenience store where people will go to and buy all sorts of stuff, candy, a Coke and whatever. And they were just using cash before. Mm-hmm. So now they're basically using their smartphone to pay for everything. So I think that kind of thing is the most likely opportunity. So I would definitely be looking at, SaaS solutions that do similar things in Africa that we're seeing. Indonesia is a hotbed of entrepreneurship, of digital entrepreneurship. And whatever I see happening in Indonesia, it's generally happened in China already and hasn't happened in the US yet, but is happening quicker in Africa. So, the United States, I mean, people are still, I mean, if you go to the supermarket, they're still dropping credit cards down, right? You still see it's still a credit card based society, but it's not the case in places like Vietnam and Indonesia and China, and I don't think that'll be the case in Africa. So I think investing in delivery platforms, fintech, I mean, the whole cashless payments for retail, even small mom and pop shops, I think that's enormous opportunities, clearly. So I don't think they're going to reinvent anything. Yeah, excuse me.
No, you're fine. There's a delay on my side, so apologies. But I was just going to ask, I mean, as you've done a number of you've lived, but also had a number of investments and efforts in Southeast Asia, a transformative market for many years and many more years to come, Africa going into that direction as well. What advice do you have for those looking to make their first investments in a region, whether it be Southeast Asia or whether it be Africa, more really around a transformative market like Africa that's still early in its cycle around entrepreneurship and technology? What advice do you have for investors out there?
Yeah, well, I would say the first thing, before I answer that question, just a quick challenge in Africa is the lack of investment funds. For example, in Indonesia, there's so much money flowing into Vietnam, Indonesia, India, that there's not enough good ideas to invest the money in. There's just too much money. In the case of Africa, there's not a lot of investment going in there compared to other emerging markets. So that's the first thing I would say. In terms of, I'm sorry, your question was, excuse me. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Sure. So advice to investors looking to make their first investments in a transformative market like Southeast Asia or like Africa, from your experience and lessons learned.
Right. The first thing I would say is look what's happened in China the last 10 years, because China is, I think, by far the most innovative, digital economy at the moment. And those type of trends they've happened in Indonesia. People have just copied pretty much what they've seen in, they've seen Uber, they've seen Lyft, they've seen WeChat, they've seen WePay, they've seen all the things that have happened with dynamic companies. The technology was easy to copy. So the software was not difficult to copy. It wasn't very proprietary. And they just out-executed the big guys in the local market, with Grab or Gojek and whatever. And I think the same thing will happen in Africa. I think these technologies, they can hire the engineers to write the code. They can basically have their own proprietary technology, and they can just out-execute local companies. Out-execute big global companies. So I would say whatever Grab is doing, Gojek, Meituan, Ulama, WePay, all that stuff, basically copy it, adjust it for your own market and execute it quickly before Alibaba gets there. Yeah, it's basically what the big negative is these local companies don't have that level of investment. So SoftBank is not throwing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars at African companies at the moment. So that's a big challenge. But I would say follow the trends. And I think if you follow the trends and you get with an entrepreneur that has the capacity, has the people around them to make things happen, and these trends have worked in other emerging markets, there's a very, very good chance it'll work in these major markets in Africa.
Great point. And Joel, I want to be sensitive to your time today as we spoke pre-show, but any closing thoughts that you have for those, again, looking at Africa and the opportunities in the area, and then where can people contact you for follow-up and continuing the conversation around Africa or Southeast Asia and other transformative markets?
Yeah, I mean, in summary, what I'd say is Africa is a big opportunity because there are a lot of people, but there are a lot more challenges in Africa than there are in the emerging markets in Asia, for example. However, it's well worth trying, and it's well worth being highly selective, as you can imagine. Valuations in Africa are going to be very high because there are very few good opportunities. So people will be chasing the same entrepreneur. So, excuse me, be prepared to pay a high valuation for something that may not be worth it in the beginning. And I would say that. Number two, do a lot of due diligence, simply because the normal methods of doing due diligence in Asia aren't available in Africa. The research, the consumer data, just the third-party financial reports, the Dun & Bradstreets, you're not going to find that. So you're going to have to do a lot of on-the-ground due diligence to reduce your risk of making the investment. But do I think it's worth it? Yes. If I was a 30-year-old guy that knew what I knew, and I could go back and I was a single guy looking for excitement, definitely Nigeria, Kenya, places like that would be places I'd want to be involved in, because I think that's the next big opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joel. And where can everyone find you online to continue the conversation around today's topic or others?
Yeah, well, we're happy to talk to anyone about things Africa. We're actually working on a project now in Nigeria with a fund, and you can find easiest way to find us is ewhospitality.com. On the contact page, people can contact us there. And I'm on LinkedIn at LinkedIn/Joel Silverstein. You can find me easily in both places.
Wonderful. Joel, thank you so very much. And audience, thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode around Africa and the opportunities surrounding it. Make sure you reach out to Joel, and when you do, add context where you heard him and what you would like to continue the conversation about as well. And if it is your first time and you're not already, make sure you do subscribe to tune in all day, every day to VCTV, as we bring, again, the best and the brightest from around the world to share their on-the-ground perspective and insights around different technologies, industries, and regions around the world. And if you'd like to be on a show like today, do reach out to the team and or myself, and we'll find that right spot for you. Speaking of team, a big thank you to the LATOKEN team and to Maria for making VCTV possible every single day. With that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. You can find me everywhere online, just like Joel as well, at Kyle Ellicott and on all social media platforms. We're going to take a little break, and we'll be back here tomorrow with more VCTV as we break down everything happening in the blockchain and fintech spaces all day on VCTV. And with that, everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Kyle. Enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye.